Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Thursday. I hope your week is going real well. And the weather is finally broke. It is wonderful outside, and I hope that I can give you a couple more tips to make your day that much better. This is the Ask Me Anything About My Travel series, and I have a very interesting question today, and that is how did I decide how long I was staying in one place? So we talked a little bit last time about doing laundry, and you have to take advantage of situations, good situations that you find yourself in. And that led me to thinking, and I got a couple questions about this. When you're traveling around in a long time as well, how do you decide when to move? How do you decide when to stay in a city and when not to stay in a city? So we're going to get into all of that today. So I guess the first point that I want to make when you're moving around quite a bit and traveling a lot and for a long period of time, it usually comes down to your experience. You really want to find your own the golden zone of where you want to stay, why you want to stay, and what works for you. And there's two different things to think about when thinking about your travel lifestyle, your travel experience, and that is the difference between structure and freedom. And it's very key to know where you are on the spectrum between structure and freedom. Now, I think a lot of people tend to fall towards the structure side because it's definitely more comfortable. You know where you're going, why you're going, and basically the itinerary is made for you. There's a lot of comfort in knowing what's going to happen next and at what time. But it's really on a long-term basis completely unsustainable because things happen, especially even in a short weeks-long vacation, things do happen. And if you jam-pack your itinerary so tight that there's no wiggle room at all, you could get yourself in trouble. You miss a flight, the bus doesn't show up on time, and if you're really packed in, I mean, we in Laos, we had a bus that was canceled and we had to go all the way back. And you heard about the Laos bus stories, and we had to take another 12-hour trip back and around because we were too planned, we were too structured. So there's definitely a downside to being completely structured in your trips and not having a little bit of freedom. Now, the freedom side that can go wrong is if you're completely unplanned, then you don't really you're in the whims of the universe basically, which I mean some people actually really do enjoy. You go with the people that you meet, you figure out things as they go, and that it is a wonderful way of travel if paired with a little bit of structure. So finding where you are on the spectrum between structure and freedom, and really starting to incorporate some freedom into your trips. Once again, I think we lean towards the structure side. If you take a moment and maybe 1 or 2 days of your week-long vacation, let it just come to serendipity, then I think you will find something that is really unique about travel, and that is tapping into the inputs around you and stuff that you weren't able to research or find beforehand. So my personal zone on the spectrum is definitely more towards the freedom side now than the structure side, but definitely some hardcore structural elements. But I like to have about 5 days in one city, and I found that to be a really key indicator for me. And that really gave me a lot of yeah, it gave me a lot of time to explore the city, especially during the weekdays, so I can really see the hustle and bustle of the city, how it moves. I really enjoyed that. But it also gave me that freedom time. I had a couple days where maybe one day where I would go see certain sites, and the other days would be with my hosts or with other friends that I had met, and sort of just let it become what it was supposed to become. So 5 days for me worked really well. And also a month in a country. I really enjoyed about a month in a country. You really get to know it. And when you spend 5 days in each city, you get to go to multiple cities and really enjoy a lot of what the country has to offer. Of course, that depends on the size of the country. You can spend a long time, 2 years in Australia traveling it because it's giant, and maybe a month in France, or maybe a month and a half in Thailand. Depends on the size and what's there. But usually a month in a country was long enough for me, and about 5 days in a city. So just something to think about when you're planning your own trip. But there are those exceptions, like I was talking about before. How do you know and when to move, when to stay, and vice versa? And it's really hard to distill that feeling down into concrete principles, because you just sort of feel it, and it depends on who you are and of course the situation that you're in, because you might have one host that you have an amazing experience and connection with, but another host maybe not so much. Maybe it's just you don't get along so well, or maybe the city itself, it feels at home. I know there's many times where I felt really at home in a place that I never expected and decided to stay a couple more days, just because you get that feeling once you enter it of like, wow, yeah, this is a place that I really enjoy. I love the way that the city moves. I love the way the people are interacting with each other. This is a place where I want to be. And once again, if you're more on that freedom side, you might be able to bump more days towards these cities compared to a more rigid itinerary where you have to leave when you plan to leave. But it's really in that feeling. And I think you do feel it almost as soon as you walk in, maybe to day one, day two. And of course, when you meet your hosts, get to talk to them, or that the hostel that you're at, who's staying there is very important, or even the hotel that you stay in, is it somewhere that you want to be? Are they nice? Is the good service? Did the not incoming problem, when the check-in process, was that fluid? That all factors into the certain situation that you feel at the time, and you really have to pay attention to that. And it happens. People can go and have a great time in Amsterdam, but you might not have a good time in Amsterdam because of all of these other factors. So just listen to yourself, listen to your emotions that come up as you're interacting with the situation that you're in. And yeah, see if you enjoy it, and don't be afraid to leave if you're not. If this is not a good place for you to go, or this is not a place where you want to be, then get out of there. You don't have to stay the 5 days. That's not a rule that exists. You don't have to stay in a place that you don't enjoy. Get out of there and go somewhere else. So it's really just a lot of experience and practice with who you are. And every single person's different. I've seen very successful stories about people that had very strict itineraries, and that just really worked for them. I was actually way more strict than a lot of my fellow travelers, because that's just the way I was. I like to know when I'm moving, when I'm showing up, and moving to the next country and stuff like that. It really made the experience more enjoyable for me. I've also met people that have hitchhiked from France to Malaysia on boats and other crazy stuff without knowing anything that's going on, and they really enjoyed it. I don't know if that would be for me, but it's possible. So finding your spot on the spectrum is very important, which takes experience. So I guess my tip for that is know that there is a spectrum, and know that there's different ways of travel, and it's an infinite number of ways. You just need to find it for you. So on your next trip, try to, if you are a more structured person, try to incorporate more freedom-based things. Maybe an entire day where you just walk. Your entire goal is to get out in the city and just walk around and see what happens. I would consider that a good introduction to a freedom day. Or if you're if you're the hitchhiker that just keeps on going, yeah, book a train to a specific place that you really want to go, and jump on the train and go and see if that happens. So try to incorporate the opposite element that you gravitate towards, and really try to find your balance. So that's what it is. Unfortunately, it's not as concrete as I would have liked. It's a lot of intuitive and listening to yourself, but that's okay. That's not so bad. We should be listening to ourselves in every facet of our life. And and I have one more tip that I would really, if for the people that really want to push themselves a little bit, one of my favorite travel into a country and out of the country tips that I have, especially for long-term travelers, if you have a month dedicated to full travel, is buy one plane ticket into a major city on one side of the country and buy the out ticket on the other side of the country. We did this in Georgia halfway through our trip and loved it, and decided to do it for the rest of our trip. So we didn't really have anything booked in between. We would fly in and have an accommodation ready for us for about 3 to 4 days in that city. And then we would just talk to people. We would ask about the country. We would ask about where we should go, what we should do. And then the plan just formed and materialized before our eyes. Like, oh, you know what? There's this tiny little town. We should go over there. Or, oh, this other big city looks really cool that I've never heard of. We should go over there. Or this place has the best of this cuisine in the country. We should definitely stop there and check it out. So that's a good challenge. Fly into one side of the country, fly out of the other, have nothing planned in between except that beginning accommodation, and see what happens. There's a lot of magic that can happen with a little bit of uncertainty, and just know you'll be able to figure it out. That's usually the goal. Is you'll know that you'll figure it out, even if you have to cross the entire country to get your ticket out of there. So those are my tips for today. I hope you enjoyed that and incorporate it into your next trip. I think those are pretty easy examples to incorporate it into your next trip. A little freedom or structure, whatever the opposite you are, and enjoy traveling, because that's what it's there for. Once again, ask me any more questions in the comments, any more questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go ramble on about random things. If you haven't checked out the podcast, those links are in the episode description or in this video description. I'm really proud of my podcast, and I think you will really enjoy it too. So check those out and enjoy your Thursday, guys. It's a wonderful day in September, and plan those next trips and get out there a little bit more often. I'll see you guys later, and see ya.